this is ContraZoom,
where we go back and forth about film.
I'm Dakota Arsenault.
And I'm Rachel Ho.
On today's show, we're continuing our A24 Retrospective. In the first two shows we did on the distribution company, we looked at the first and second releases by them. Today, we are jumping ahead to their latest film. David Lowrey's The Green Knight was originally scheduled to premiere at the South by Southwest Festival back in March of 2020. Unfortunately, that fest was one of the very first things to be cancelled due to COVID. Lowrey then spent the next 6 months re-editing the film to his satisfaction, and after numerous delays, it finally came out on July 30th in North America. While we won't be spoiling the entire movie, we will be freely discussing most points of the show.
O greatest of kings, let one of your knights try to land a blow against me. Indulge me in this game.
I will beat thee.
One year hence.
Another year nearly gone already. You must seek him out.
Was it not just a game?
Perhaps. But it is not complete.
So if you have not seen it yet, I advise waiting until you do so. That all said, Rachel, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How you doing?
I'm excellent. So this is going to be an interesting one. You actually saw this ahead of its wide release at a press screening, and you struggled with writing your review on Exclaim, which I'll link to it in the show notes for everyone to read. And you're really battling with how to write this thing, and you figured that in order to discuss it here and I guess finalize your opinions on it, you needed to watch it a second time. So you went on opening weekend this past weekend and saw it again. And now I'm going to ask you, have your thoughts on the film materialized or crystallized any better seeing it a second time?
No, is my answer to that. A big no. I mean, I'm assuming everybody who's listening to this has watched it, and I think like there's an understanding of it's a different movie. It's a very tricky movie, and you know, I'm incredibly divided on it. On one hand, it's incredibly like technically. I was saying this to you before. Like it's technically brilliant. Like it's near flawless in terms of sound design and cinematography and music and you know all those and performances. Like everything, it works. But it's just the movie itself. Like I'm having a hard time with it. Like I'm not sure. Do I love it? Do I hate it? I don't hate it. I know I don't hate it. But I'm not sure if I like it. Like I don't know. How did you feel? So you watched it just last night on opening weekend.
Yes. Yeah, it's interesting where you know, you would text me and you're like, I don't know how I feel about this movie. I don't know if I love it. And I'm like, oh no, oh no. Like this is probably my most anticipated movie of the year. There's a couple other ones right up there, you know, Dune, The French Dispatch, or stuff like that. But this would probably be in the trio of the most anticipated for me. I love David Lowrey. I love A Ghost Story. And I didn't love The Old Man and the Gun, but I thought it was a pretty good movie, a nice Robert Redford throwback vehicle for him. But yeah, A Ghost Story was one of my favorite. It was my favorite film that year that it came out. And so I was really excited because, you know, the reviews were coming out that were like, hey, as a heads up, this is not, you know, your medieval action, swords and sandals type of movie. This is a very meditative, contemplative film where not everything makes sense. It's going to be kind of confusing, but it's going to be a real treat to look at. And I'm like, okay, hey, you know, Ghost Story. A lot of people really didn't like that because it was a slow, weird movie that was supposed to be about ghosts, but it's not. It's more about the passage of time and what that means to humanity and all that sort of stuff. And so I was like, great, this sounds like it's going to be right up my wavelength. And then, you know, the movie finished and, you know, basically the last half of the movie, I was sitting there with like my hands clasped with like my fingers propping up my chin being like, yes, I see, like a therapist listening to someone. And at the end of it, I'm like, and I don't know if I came out ahead anymore. And so it's just one of those movies where every once in a while you get really challenging. You're like, okay, great. I want to read some reviews about this, hear what other people are thinking. Maybe it can help galvanize myself. I went and I read your review right away. I read David Ehrlich's review on IndieWire, I believe, right away. Excellent review by both of you. And that really helped me a lot of kind of like putting things into context. And then, you know, just kind of scrolling through Letterboxd and sort of seeing what other people are saying and just being like, okay, you know what? I think I do quite like this movie. Like you mentioned, technically it's a real feat. But then it's how does the story sort of all connect? And it almost reminds me a little bit of I'm Thinking of Ending Things, where I finished that movie where I'm like, I think I like this, but I need to understand it a bit better. And, you know, after listening and reading some stuff, that really helped me understand the movie better, and it became one of my favorites. And I think this is the type of movie where I think it could become one of my favorites of the year, but I might need to watch it a second time and continue reading and listening to other smarter people than myself.
Well, first of all, happy that you went to me before David Ehrlich. Like, that's
of course
obvious. Obviously, that's what everybody should be doing.
Once again, plugging that on explain.ca. Check it
out. You know, the expectation thing. Like, I think that's the biggest struggle that I had was the first time, and it kind of leads to why I felt the need to watch it a second time so quickly too. Like, I did the screening on a Monday, and then by the Saturday, like the following Saturday, I watched it again. And I wasn't expecting like a Ridley Scott, you know, massive, big gladiator Troy-esque battle. Like, that's not what I was thinking, but I kind of, because under the A24 banner, you know, it's not just going to be that, right? Like, it's not just going to be straightforward where there's a bad guy and there's a good guy and they're just going to fight it out and the good guy's going to win. Like, you know that going into an A24, you know, that's not going to be their movie. But I kind of thought there would be more of that, like more action. I thought it would be like, kind of like those movies, but with an A24 twist, I guess is the best way to say it. Mm-hmm. And it's not. Like, it's honestly completely, there's no movie like this, especially a medieval movie. There's no medieval movie like this. And like to the credit of David Lowrey and everyone who worked on it, I think it's a really big feat what they've accomplished there. But I watched it a second time because I thought maybe I'm judging it unfairly, like because my expectations were a certain thing. You can't knock a movie for not meeting your expectations. Like, I personally don't believe in that. So I thought, okay, now that I know what the movie's about, I'm going to go watch it a second time. And I've adjusted everything. My expectations are adjusted. I know what I'm getting myself into. So like, settle in and watch it. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, on my second watch, it still didn't really click. Like, it didn't, I didn't watch and be like, damn, like, I really misjudged this movie. This is incredible. Like, what a work of art this is. I just kind of watched it and went, okay, like, I see what they're doing here. I see what they're going for. Cool, I guess. Like, I don't know. I like that the movie has created such strong reactions, though. Like, I think that's kind of one of the early questions that we talked about in the very first episode was like, what makes an A24 movie? And I think one thing, I know I definitely didn't say it, and I don't know if you said it, but it creates their movies generate a strong reaction. It can be a reaction of like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life, or what kind of piece of crap is this? Like, this is just
sometimes for the same movie.
This movie in particular, I mean, like, Green Knight has created a real divide, and I actually think it's going to be one of those movies that I don't really follow Rotten Tomatoes, but I feel like it's going to be one where the rating for the critics is really, really high, and then the rating for audience is going to be lower, definitely lower at the very minimum. I can
answer that for you right now. I have this on Wikipedia. On Rotten Tomatoes, it has an 89% rating, which is pretty high.
Yeah, very high.
Average rating of 8.1 out of 10, which is even better. But then you look at the cinema score, which polls people of asking them to give a movie between an A and an F rating, and it has a C+ from audiences, which, to be fair, cinema score usually is done at like generic, mass events where it's just like, hey, come see this movie. Now tell us what you think about it. It's not like it's not like, hey, A24 fans, what do you think of this movie? Because it all would be an A+. So yeah, Cinema Score is an interesting one. Every once in a while, there'll be a movie that gets an F from them, and like, it's like this huge thing. Like I remember when Mother got an F, and that was a big deal. And so that really was like a big talking point for that movie to come out. It usually is movies like this where it's not very straightforward. You don't quite understand exactly what's happening. And in the end, you're kind of left with more questions than answers. Those types of movies don't do very well for Cinema Score. Yet on the flip side, I can see on Rotten Tomatoes, it has an 89% fresh rating. That's fantastic.
Is that a fresh rating for both critic and audience? Like they put them together? So the other one that I was thinking about was The Lighthouse. Like I feel like we'll obviously at some point get into The Lighthouse, but I feel like that was a movie that would have, I'm looking at the Rotten Tomatoes right now for it, and it has a 90% tomato meter, but the audience score is 72.
And here we've got 89% for critics and 54% for audience. So there you go.
And it doesn't surprise me because this is the kind of movie, like my very first instinct when I came out of the press screening, I was like, this is a movie that critics are going to love it. And people who are cinephiles are going to love it. Like if you consider yourself a cinephile or like somebody who likes like movies, like a real movie lover, I feel like is going to like it. And I kind of hate saying this because I feel like it's very patronizing, but when it comes to like mass audiences, a wider audience, it's not going to be something that clicks. And, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I don't know. But I do like, that it creates a reaction. I think that's a cool place for like somebody like David Lowrey to be in, that you can create these movies that it is like people love it. And when you love it, you really love it. But when you hate it, you really hate it. And I would think that for like a filmmaker, that's a pretty sweet spot to be in. Yeah. I would like that if I had any aptitude to make a film. I like that to me would be like a pretty cool spot to live in.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I think I'm going to get through some of the key details of this movie now, and then we can kind of get into more plot specific points. So obviously, normally when we're doing these shows, we're looking back at movies that came out several years in the past, but obviously this just came out on July 30th, 2021, directed by David Lowrey. It stars Dev Patel as Sir Gawain, Alicia Vikander in a dual role as Essel and the Lady, Joel Edgerton as the Lord, Sarita Choudhury as Gawain's mother, Sean Harris as the King, Kate Dickie as the Queen, Ralph Ineson as the Green Knight, Barry Keoghan as the Scavenger, and Erin Kellyman as Winifred. So the plot summary, typing this up was also a little bit difficult. I'm like, do I just explain everything? But young Sir Gawain wants to become a knight, and on Christmas Day, he goes to a party hosted by his aunt and uncle, the Queen and King respectively. While he feels like an imposter in a room full of legendary Knights of the Round Table, his aunt and uncle tell him that he needs to make his own legend. His mother, not present at the party, conjures up some magic that summons a mysterious Green Knight to the castle and wants to play a game. Whoever is brave enough to land a strike against him will then have to find him a year later to receive the exact same blow. Gawain, realizing this is his opportunity to make a name for himself, stands up and beheads the monstrous knight. At first, the tale of the Green Knight Killer makes Gawain famous, but no one knows what he has coming. He then goes on a journey to find the knight and face his destiny. And then lastly, how did A24 acquire this movie? Normally, A24 just distributes films, but in the last few years, they've been involved from the beginning. After distributing David Lowry's 2017 film A Ghost Story, they were involved from the start as an investor and distributor of this film. So, I think one of the key things to talk about is, I mentioned at the top that after the delay of this movie, David Lowrey spent the next 6 months re-editing the film to his liking. Was those 6 months used well, or do you think it just maybe muddled the waters and made things much more confusing for audiences?
It's really hard to say without seeing the original one. I would love it if this came out on DVD or DVD. What am I talking about? It's going to come out on Blu-ray. Sorry. Okay. At least I didn't say what. Yeah, it's going to be like something fancier than a DVD. But I would love it if they include that cut. I don't know if he wants people to see it because maybe it's, maybe he thinks that this is much better. But do you know what the details are of like what it in and around, like what did he edit? What areas was he looking at of like tightening or loosening or adding?
Idea.
No. I don't know. It's interesting. I like for a movie like this that it is so unique and so abstract. I would love to see what else he was kind of different ways that he was looking at it in his interpretation. And I believe there are some critics who did see it last year in March of 2020, just before everything locked down. So it would be. I saw somebody tweet about it, and I wish I had bookmarked it because it would be really interesting to see what their responses are. About how it changed, because that to me is always really interesting. I love a director's cut. How do you feel about director's cuts? Do you like watching them?
Not really. Most of the time I feel they're pretty superfluous and don't really add anything. The only time that I feel that it really did anything was for Blade Runner, the original one. Okay. Where he removed the narration and stuff like that and made it more to his vision. Other than that, like most of the time, like I know it's so trendy right now with the Zack Snyder Justice League stuff going on, and now the subsequent David Ayer Suicide Squad stuff that's popped up, where we want to believe that directors are these, infallible people, and those damn studio heads come in and muck everything up and ruin the creative process, completely forgetting the idea of sometimes, directors don't know everything. Very often they've been working on a project for so long that in their own head they have all the answers, but when you watch it as an outsider with fresh perspective, you can look at them and be like, hey, this is not a very good product. You need to change things around. And that's what studios are for. And so many people now, fans, are so obsessed with this idea of the director has the perfect vision and they're always right. And every time that, especially the conversation, like that's why I have no interest in watching Justice League. That was a bad movie to begin with. Adding 2 extra hours to a bad movie.
You don't want to sit down? You don't want to sit down for 4 hours and watch a lot of slow motion? No. Slow motion for 4 hours. I actually did. I watched it twice.
and by all accounts, it is a decent movie. And like a lot of people, I know a lot of people are a fan of it, and so that it does greatly improve the original movie. But the problem is, improve it to what extent? And so this idea of a director is infallible and they need to only have director's cuts and all this sort of stuff, that's a load of baloney for me. There's only been a handful of movies where it usually happens when there is behind the scenes stuff involving the studio, not necessarily the director, but the studio. So things like, presidents changing hands, and the new president wants nothing to do with this movie, so they kind of chop it all up because they don't like it was the predecessor's work and stuff like that. I think of something like Kingdom of Heaven, which very similarly to this movie is more of a meditative tale and nothing like Troy, which it was being marketed as. And so it got all chopped up for its original release. And then later when Ridley Scott was able to redo the edit, did it become a better film? And that's maybe a bit of a trend with Ridley Scott.
He's very appropriate.
Or Tony Scott. I don't know. It was one of the Scott brothers.
It was a Scott brother, yeah.
Yeah.
I like a director's cut out of kind of, I guess, curiosity is the best way to say it. It's like, I like watching it and then watching the original and just saying, what is it like? What did they think that should be cut? Like, what did they feel like would be different? And sometimes it's not that different. I want Midsommar, Ari Aster's director's cut. I actually really like his, but there are a lot of scenes that got cut that you're like, yeah, I can see why this isn't here. But then there were also a couple scenes where I'm like, oh, that scene is helpful because it helped move the story along, or it helped understand a character's motivation a little bit better. Snyder cut's like, that's whatever. And the Ayer cut, those are completely different beasts, I think. But for The Green Knight in particular, it's like, it's one of those movies that, because it is so artistic, it is so art house, I would be incredibly interested to see what his original cut was and why he thought, like, a director's commentary for this movie would also be very insightful, of understanding like where he thought a change could be made and what kind of changes. Like, I'm kind of watching it thinking, what could he have changed? Like, is it in the, like a, there's not jumping, I don't want to ruin too much, but like I'm just curious where he thought it could be changed, Yeah. But
and it sounds like, based on A24, they're not a very hands-on studio to begin with. Yeah. So I would not be surprised if what had happened was Lowrey knew he had the South by Southwest premiere date, that was when he needed to have a cut submitted by. So it was a bit of a rush job. And then he was probably further trimming it down, taking stuff out rather than adding stuff in once he got the extra 6 months to do this. This sounds like these are both director's versions. Not that like, oh, this, the first one's the A24 cut and the second one's the Lowrey cut. No, this just sounds like this was just a director sort of being given a little bit more time in the edit room, which very often we sort of hear that where a movie will get delayed just a little bit more, where it was supposed to play at a festival and they end up not being able to make the festival or whatever. Or they'll play the festival and be like, hey, as a heads up, when the movie comes out, it's going to be a little bit different from what you see here.
It's like that idea of tinkering as well, right? Like, I mean, if you've ever watched The League, did you watch The League when it was out? It's about like the fantasy football. They talk about tinkering all the time, like tinkering with your lineup. And I think anybody, if you write for a living, or if you create presentation decks, or a graphic designer, for example, like that's perfect. It's or even if you do like spreadsheet stuff, like you can keep going in and changing it and changing it and changing it when they give you more time. And there has to come a point where you just go like, okay, I gotta stop, because it's like, it's getting too much. And like you said, like at the beginning, that's kind of what a studio is there to do, is to tell you like, you got to stop now. Like it's fine. It's perfect the way it is. And I feel like any filmmaker, if you keep giving them extended periods of time, they will just keep going back and changing it and changing it and changing it. And yeah, I agree with you though. I think that it is, both of them are the Lowrey cut. There is no release the Lowrey cut. We have seen a Lowrey cut. There's just another Lowrey cut. Would you watch it if he released his original version?
Probably not. If the director is saying, hey, this was not my intended vision, I eventually got to the place that I was satisfactory with, then, that's the one, that's the cut. Like, what I don't know what could be so different.
Yeah.
Like what I imagine, this movie does not have a lot of dialogue. What I probably imagine most is he was probably taking out dialogue.
Yeah, true. That's a good point. Yeah, there's very little dialogue in this.
Yeah, so I guess let's kind of talk about maybe some actual scenes or moments. I think right from the get-go, this movie opens on a shot of Dev Patel as Gawain sitting on a throne, and a crown lands on his head, and then he bursts into flames, and we get this voiceover saying that the tale isn't really the tale that you want to be hearing. And kind of right from the get-go, we get this sort of like imagery, dreamlike imagery, where you almost can't believe what you're seeing. And so I think it's very interesting, where a lot throughout this movie, you're watching it, and you don't know if it's real or not, or what's magic and what's not. So there's so many moments where you're wondering, is this actually happening, or is it all in my head? Is it all in the character's head? What exactly is happening right here? And so I think that's probably one of the biggest struggles a lot of people will face watching this movie, is when you're describing it, you go, it may or may not have actually happened. I don't know. And that kind of makes it hard to levy a judgment against a film if you don't know what you're watching is actually happening.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. Because for me, whenever there's like an ambiguous, who knows if it's real, who knows if it's not, to me, that's like usually that's part of why I like a movie. Like, I like the kind of the question mark behind it. And I like being able to talk to other people about like, well, what do you think? Like, do you think it was actually happening? Do you think it was magic? Do you think it was a dream? Do you think like whatever, so on and so forth. But about that first scene, I love that opening. I don't know about you, but I thought like him like bursting into flames. I remember when I sat there and watched it, like you, I this was a very highly anticipated movie on my list for the year. And when that scene happened, I just was like, oh, this is going to be good. Like I was really like, this is going to be awesome. Because I really, really enjoyed that opening scene.
It almost sort of feels like every 5 minutes in this movie, you kind of wish, you're like, I wish there was a high quality print of this so that way I can blow it up and put it on my wall.
I'll say one of my biggest kind of pluses on this movie, one of the things that I love about this movie so much, is there are so many shots in this and Lowrey does it really smartly. Like he like pauses on certain frames and they look like artwork. Like it looks like, yeah. And it's like, it looks like a Renaissance painting. A lot of the scenes, like it's gorgeous the way he does it. And I love that and this was like on a second watch that I noticed, was like, he really takes the time to pause. Like, he doesn't just go, oh, like, that's cool. Like, he really pauses for a few seconds to just really get you to be like, look at how flipping gorgeous this is.
Look at how competent I am as a director.
Yeah. And good on him. If I were that competent, I would do the same damn thing. Like, it's really nice. And like, I love the way that he does that. Cause you're right. There were so many shots in this that I'm like, I could totally have a print of this and I would be very, very happy about that.
Mm-hmm. So I guess let's go back to sort of the magic aspect of this. You know, the first real big one that we get is when Gawain is at the Christmas party at the castle and his mother isn't there. And then later, I only learned this because I was reading the credits later. It was his mother and his sisters were basically conjuring up a spirit, and they like pull a tooth out of a skull, and you know there's a feather in there, and they put it in this middle of this circle, and then it bursts into flames and grows a plant, and then the plant turns into a letter that they're writing, and then the writer shows up in the Green Knight's hand when he bursts through the door. All that stuff, I had no idea what was going on, and that was sort of the thing where I kind of had to go back and read some reviews later on to kind of help understand that for me of possibly, but actually it was his mother that was kind of controlling this aspect of manifesting Gawain's destiny. So am I right? Like, are you interpreting that in the same way? Because that was a scene that I really struggled with understanding.
Yeah, that's how I took it as. I didn't realize they were his sisters. I didn't think about that. I thought they were just like, I don't know. I actually didn't think about who the other girls were.
I
was just like, they're just
other witchers. But yeah, looking at the credits, there's credited as older sister, sisters. Middle sister, and youngest sister.
Oh, that's so interesting. I did get the idea that his mom is. I mean, there's somewhere in the movie that like somebody calls his mom a witch, but I did get like you get that sense that she is a magical person, someone who is able to do these things.
Which sort of makes sense because, you know, in this time period, people that were, you know, witches or wizards, you know, the sort of Merlin trope is considered someone that was a highly valued member of the king or queen's inner circle. They were there to provide counsel, and you know, whether or not it was real or not, what they were doing, they were supposedly the people who could help see the future and understand a path forward as a counselor for them. So it makes sense that the king's sister is a witch.
And there's another, like an older man that's a part of the king's crew, as it were, who every now and then, like, the king will look at him and he'll kind of like close his eyes, and I guess he gets like a premonition, and then he'll like nod and be like, yeah, it's like, you're cool. So you're absolutely right. Like, yeah, like magic, and especially in medieval stories and tales and movies, like it's a very, very popular thing. And I love that trope too. I think that's kind of what makes those kinds of movies really neat. It elevates them quite a bit. But yeah, no, I did interpret it that way. And one thing that I thought about was when he cuts the head off of the Green Knight, and you can see it in the king's face. Sean Harris, by the way, we were talking about Mission Impossible before, and I was very excited for this movie because I knew he was in this one. But he, like, you can see the look on the king's face where it's just kind of like shit, like, dude, why'd you do that? And then his mom too, like, you could see a bit of disappointment in her face of, oh, like, he had to go and do that. Like, he didn't get it. He didn't understand his ego, his hubris went too far, and he didn't get it. Like, he didn't understand the game. And I love that moment of like the two of them just being kind of like, oh, God damn it, Gawain, what are you doing, man? Like I really enjoyed those notes.
Yeah. And then we get a few times throughout this film where that sort of comes into play. And one that also I had to read about to fully get it, where there's a point where when Gawain is on his path to the Green Knight's chapel, and he comes across some thieves who rob him. They tie him up and leave him sitting at a tree. And then we get this fantastic shot where the camera starts out on Dev Patel and then does like a full 360 rotation and then turns around. And when it gets back to him, he's now just a skeleton.
I love that.
And then what happens is the camera, instead of continuing the direction it was going, it stops and reverses itself back and does another 360 back to Dev Patel. So it basically shows him in a way that if he was left for dead, he dies, and so somehow time gets reversed and he ends up being still alive. So it's almost like he was given a second chance to do this. So it's one of those things where it's like, is this his mother involved? Is this just the general magic of the universe involved? But he does get the opportunity to set himself free, because as soon as he gets back, suddenly it's like he is imbued with the sense of urgency where he needs to get out of there. And so right away he starts like flopping along to try to get to his sword in order to cut himself free. But yeah, it's a gorgeous shot where it does like 2 360 turns. I love it.
It's very cool. Like, again, it's a technically incredible movie. Like, I love that. Like, I love the way he uses the camera to show a passage of time and then a reversal of time. And then, the puppet show that they had, like showing kids, and then they had the spindle in the background. That I liked how that kind of showed also passage of time. Like, they whip through the year really quickly. And I enjoyed that. Like, I like that he does kind of more creative things, even though he does use, they're not subtitles, like subtitles, I guess, like on the screen. Like, he does write them out and say like 1 year later, he says 1 too quick year later. I think that's what the text was, or something like that. But yeah, I think the way he did that, like just showing the passage of time is very unique, like, and it's cool, and it's better than, this movie would have been one of those that like a narrator, like, and I know the movie starts off with narration, but this is the kind of movie that I think another director might have chosen to just narrate the whole thing, because it's the origins of the story. It's a poem that's existed for hundreds of years, and so it would be appropriate to have a narrator who's like telling this story to kids, for example. Like, they do have the puppet show thing, so it is obviously getting shown there. But did you find it weird though that his sword was still there? Or like, is that his mom's, like, do you think that's like another magical thing that his mom's doing? Like, why was his sword left? Why didn't they take it? Why didn't they take his yellow hoodie thing? It's not a hoodie, like not the way we think of hoodies, but like his cape.
Yeah, that definitely seemed to be odd. I don't really know, because it seemed like the thieves were definitely, the main one played by Barry Keoghan definitely was most interested in the axe and the horse, and rode off in order to get the glory of killing the Green Knight himself. But yeah, so yeah, the rest of it, it's just one of those things where I think you just kind of need to chalk it up as it was irrelevant for the thieves, which was interesting. I don't know. There isn't really an answer for me.
And they broke the shield too, which I'm like, why would you break that? Like, you could use that. Like, you're living, they're kind of like nomadic people who are just living in the woods. Like, you could use this in the future. I guess I don't know why. Being
there was like an entire battlefield of dead people, and they were already looting them. There was more than enough shield and swords.
Yeah, true. True.
Clothes. I don't know. So that's tricky. But and then another really interesting magical scene. This is our last one I'll talk about, is when he meets Saint Winifred. And there's a moment where there's this weird line of humor. Every once in a while, there's a couple lines of humor in this movie that are just like so out of left field, where you just do not expect it. Where that makes the joke hit even harder. And I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but it was just really funny, where clearly she's a ghost, but she doesn't really look like a ghost. She looks real enough. And he goes to like reach out and touch her to confirm if she's real or not. She goes, "Don't touch me." Why would you do that?
Also, okay, so I watched it twice, as we've said. I will say in both times I watched it, so once with press and then once just at a normal screening, that got a laugh both times. It got a laugh both times. So it's funny. Like, I like that. Like, because Dev Patel just kind of looks like, anytime I see a ghost, I think of Casper. Like, Casper was years ago, but like, it's just, I guess from childhood, it's just stuck with me. But I just like, he seems like a little kid that's like trying to touch Casper to be like, what the hell is this? Like, are you real? Yeah. And then I like, she does a really good line reading of that. I've just been like, don't touch me. Like, what are you doing?
A knight should know that. Or a
knight should know that. Yeah. It's a great line. Yeah.
that whole sequence is like, it's so weird because it's probably the scariest scene of the whole movie, and then also it's probably the funniest scene of the whole movie.
Yeah.
And then also it has probably some of the most striking shots of him diving into the water, and like it's all red, and he's reaching out to grab the skull at the bottom of the lake. So like that scene kind of has everything going for it.
I love that. That was probably my favorite sequence. My favorite sequence? Probably not. The end sequence is probably my favorite sequence, but my favorite scene, yeah, I would say it's that one. I thought it was so interesting too, to like understand, because I was interested in her. I think that was the thing. I was really interested in her story and, you know, what would happen with her down the line. Like I was very invested in that character, and I really like that. And like you said, the color is such a big thing in this movie. Like, obviously it's called The Green Knight, so maybe we shouldn't be not surprised by it, but like Lowrey uses color really, really effectively in this. Like, and it's very obvious, but not heavy-handed, which I find impressive.
So I want to kind of talk about your review that you wrote, where I think you kind of hit on something really interesting, and this idea of it being almost video game like an RPG one, and it reminds me a little bit of the Sam Mendes film from a couple of years ago, 1914. I think I'm screwing up the year. 1917. Wow, thank you. I couldn't remember that. Where that was something that was almost accused of that, about that movie, that it was very video gamey, that it was very much like, okay, you complete a challenge and then you move on to the next one. And you wrote about that being sort of similar. Now, I don't know if you're saying that as a positive or a negative or not, but I sort of love to hear more about your train of thought on that concept, because I thought that was a fantastic way of looking at the movie.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I don't think it's neither positive nor negative, to be honest. I just thought it's interesting. Video games, to me, I'm not a massive gamer, but I do like, there's a couple games that I really like. There's a game called Dark Souls, for anybody who's familiar with it, that I really love that movie. I really love that game, and I really love the story behind that game, like the lore behind it. And this Green Knight, the reason I wrote that was because while I was watching The Green Knight, I was just thinking about Dark Souls in like the back of my head, like the different levels of Dark Souls and the way that Dark Souls is laid out in this kind of these maps that you go to different places. And I always thought it was interesting with video games that it's been very difficult for Hollywood to adapt a good video game movie. I don't know what the deal is, but there's not many great ones out there. I would actually say that the ones that are quote unquote good, we like them because they're kind of like bad good, if that makes sense. Like, they're a little cheesy and they're kind of just fun. But which is such a shame, because video games actually have a really deep storyline to them. Like, really good video games always have really good storylines to them, and they construct the game according to the story. And it, like, you move through it really fluidly, and it's really nice. And The Green Knight to me just really struck me as, this is a video game. This is him, you know. I say it in the review, but it's like there's a trailer at the beginning where you set up the quest. You're given your quest, and then you're on your way, and you go and you hit different mini bosses and different fights along the way, and you find NPCs, like you said, and all that. And I just found it an interesting thing, and it would be interesting to know if Lowrey, if he intended it to be like that. But it doesn't surprise me that much, just because, like I said, video games, like good ones, good RPG games, they really do follow a storyline in the exact same way that a movie does. It's just you're controlling it, and you're fighting, collecting credits, completing missions, so on and so forth. So it was something that kept nagging at me. And then at the end, maybe this was something too that maybe it kind of dampened the first time I watched it, why I wasn't overly enthused about it, was every video game ends in a big boss fight. Like, that's you get to the end of your video game, and it's a big boss that you're fighting, and hopefully that boss is well constructed. It's a hard fight. It's not too, like, it's not impossible, but it's difficult. And I kind of thought, oh, this is leading up to something like that, and then of course it doesn't lead to that at all. But yeah, it was just something that became apparent to me while I was watching it, probably about the time after the thieves, when after Gawain comes across the thieves, that I realized, like, there was a bit of a trend there.
That's interesting. Yeah. Well, I thought it was a very interesting theory, and I liked reading about it. It just sort of gave me a different interpretation and take on the film, and I'm glad that you had written about that, because that is one that I liked hearing about.
Thank you. See? David Ehrlich's not giving these things, is he?
No, he is not. So screw him. Are there any other major kind of scenes or moments you kind of want to talk about? Obviously, it would be impossible to rehash the entire movie, but is there any other big stuff you want to kind of hash out?
We can't really get into it because it would be overly spoiler, but the last sequence in the movie, like that kind of last big one, just speaking on it in very vague terms, it is probably, there's no dialogue through that entire, I don't know how many minutes it was, but there's no dialogue in it. And yet it is the most compelling part of the movie, in my opinion, was that section, was that last, let's call it 10 minutes, like the last 10 minutes of the movie where, you there's a bit of a flash forward. But anyways, it's incredibly compelling. And I love the way that Lowrey tells the story, using, like I said, no dialogue, but it's just Dev Patel is amazing in it. Like, I think that last 10 minutes is kind of, that's everything for Dev Patel. Like he's so good in this movie. And to me, it really kind of punctuates right at the end there. And Alicia Vikander, I should say too. She's amazing in it as well. Like she really shines in those last bits there. Actually, let's backtrack a little bit even before that. When they go into the castle with the Lord and the lady, I suppose. What did you think the old lady, what was her deal? What did you get on her?
That's tough. So I guess for everyone everyone has seen this if they're listening to it. If not, but it's Joel Edgerton and Alicia Vikander popping up in a second role. And that really kind of weirded me out. I'm like, I thought Alicia Vikander was, the prostitute at the beginning of the movie. What the hell's going on with this? And then I realized, I'm like, oh no, she's playing both parts. And they're living together. I don't know if they are a couple. I imagine if their names are the Lord and the Lady, they are. And then a blind woman, older woman, I'm guessing one of their mothers lives with them. And she just kind of sits there silently, seemingly watching, despite the fact that she has a blindfold on, because she's always there. And it always seems like she's judging you for what you're doing.
And doesn't say a word.
Doesn't say nothing. A word, which is the worst kind of judgment.
Yeah.
That was also another very sort of tricky aspect to get, where Joel Edgerton's Lord also wants to play a game, much like the Green Knight, and so you wonder if there's maybe a bit of a connection there. And then later on, Alicia Vikander's lady says a line about enchanted belt that she claims that she made, but she describes it in the exact same way that Gawain's mother described to him when she made it. And this was a belt that was stolen by the scavengers. So I feel like I'm just kind of like rehashing plot devices, like what actually happened. But like, this was another really difficult scene to comprehend what was going on, and in the sort of mental games that were being played in this. In the end, the Lord also wants to play a game where he says, whatever you get in this castle, I want as well, and I will give you whatever I bring back from the hunt. And so the lady kisses him, and then later he kisses the Lord, as that was what he claimed that he got in the castle, ignoring the fact that he also got the magic belt with some extraness to it. I'm trying to be vague for that because I don't really want to talk about it too much. But yeah, so definitely a bit of like a mind twist of a castle where there's clearly some strong bisexual energy going on in that place, with this creepy old blind lady watching everything.
I feel like the blind woman, to me, she represents why people don't like the movie. Not because she's blind. Sorry, I don't know. I focused on the blind. I'm not saying this is like an ableist situation here. I'm just saying I think
people are blind and they cannot see what is in front of them.
People are really upset about that. They just don't care for it. No, but I feel like because the old woman, she is there, and clearly like she is meant to represent something. Like, I don't think she's just there to be there, you know, like she's meant to represent something, and it's on us as an audience to interpret the movie and put it all together and say, oh, okay, that's what she is. But I feel like that's why people don't like the movie, because you look at it and you go like, what the bleep is that? Like, what the hell is this? Yeah. You know, like what, like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, and it's not the reason I feel like it's slightly patronizing in many ways to be like, oh, well, wide audiences don't get it. It's like, there's a good group of people who I go to the movies to watch movies to be entertained. That's it. Mm-hmm. And it's not that they're stupid. It's not that they're looking to be spoon-fed film, like stories and symbolism and those kinds of things. I don't think that that's the case at all. But then when you kind of come across something so random like this is where you lose the people who are just like, I just wanted to come in and watch like a couple hours of like a cool medieval movie, and you're giving me
this weekend Jungle Cruise came out. Those people should have gone and saw that instead.
But it's like, Inception is a good, I always like go to Inception as a movie as like, it had massive like appeal, right? Like everybody seemed to love it. Critics like it. General, like let's call them general film goers, people who maybe only go to see a couple movies a year at the theater, they all loved it too, because, you know, it was an interesting story, and it doesn't talk down. I know there's a lot of exposition in it, but it doesn't really talk down to people. It makes you, like, you have to think, you have to process, you have to put it together, but it's there. Like, all the pieces are there for you to put it together. This one, though, it's like, it's just so random. It's really out there, and I don't know if maybe there needs to be knowledge about the poem, about King Arthur, about, you know, maybe there's something we're missing in that sense, because I'm not familiar at all with the original poem or anything like that. So maybe we're missing something in that way. But I feel like it's things like that are really turning off a lot of people when they watch it, because they just go, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, it's just stupid, you know. And I see where they're coming from in a sense.
I bet you right now there is a critic that is working on an essay about this movie, and in a month or two it's going to come out and it's going to be like 20,000 words. Because these types of movies always inspire that type of critical writing, where someone is going to deconstruct everything that is going on. Mm-hmm. And yeah, David Lowrey is definitely the type of director. He did not put that woman in here in the movie just because she looks cool, because she's blind and has a nice costume going on. No, there's a very specific reason. And maybe if we did know the poem better or understanding that sort of stuff, it would make a bit more sense. But yeah, I'm sure there is a narrative device reason why she's in there, especially the concept of not being able to see things. That is a very powerful trope to use. And so what does that mean? And so so there's a few things in this where you just sort of wonder what it all means. And I mentioned how Alicia Vikander's lady gives a speech that sounds almost word for word. You can probably speak to this better than I can, almost word for word of what Gawain's mother said at the beginning when she gives him the belt too. Yeah. That can't be a coincidence either. Why is she saying that? And, you know, Joel Edgerton's Lord says, this house does funny things. So are we to understand that the entire house may not even be real? This entire castle is not real, or maybe it's real and everything that's happening inside is all imagined or all magic or what have you? Are these people really existing? Especially since you have Alicia Vikander playing two characters, which sort of symbolize the same person. The lady would be someone that Gawain could marry and could have a life with. And whereas the prostitute, Essel, that she plays at the beginning, she wants him to admit that he loves her and can see a life together with him, and he won't say that, so he can't marry her because of her standing and that sort of thing. Like, is it supposed to be the same woman, just in different versions of herself? Like, all that sort of stuff. What's happening in this castle?
And there's going to be people who love to sit down, and I mean, in normal times, you sit down like a coffee shop and just chat about it after the movie. You know, and in that sense, I think this movie's quite a success in that it generates a ton of discussion. Like you said, there's going to be a ton of film essays and probably books that are going to come out about this. And, you know, it's going to be one that I think film critics in particular are going to be talking about it for ages. Like, it's film essayists. Like, it's going to be a movie that is going to endure for a very, very long time for reasons that a lot of people might think are kind of pretentious. Like, I'll throw that word out there. Like, they might think it's a little bit pretentious, and maybe it is. And I mean, to each is their own. I really don't believe that movies need to be made for everybody. Like, we have Marvel for that. We don't need every other studio to do something like that. So it goes back to what is A24? What is an A24 movie? And I think Green Knight actually is probably one of the strongest definitions of what is an A24 movie. It's one that just creates a lot of strong reactions, a lot of discussion, and is borderline pretentious.
Yeah, and I think that's basically all you can really ask for. And frankly, I'm so happy that I got to see this in theaters. I would have been so upset if I would have had to watch this at home. And I'm glad that it was like my theater was mostly packed as far as COVID standards go, where you had to have 2 empty seats on either side of you and no one could sit directly behind you, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. I got there fairly early, and the theater was already probably about a quarter full of what eventually became. And so I was sitting in the balcony in the first row, so I wasn't able to tell who was coming down in the main section and then who was also coming behind me. But when the movie ended, there was a lot of people leaving the theater, and like, of course, everyone was like chatting right away about it. So obviously it had to be a good thing where people were discussing it right away. And I'm so happy that a movie like this is able to pull out the crowds, because even if you're not a fan of it, and if you walk away and you're like, I didn't like it, I think it's still the type of movie, if you're willing to have a discussion about film and about filmmaking art, this is the type of movie that I love to see made. You can hate this movie, and I will be so happy that you went out and saw it.
100%, yeah. And to your point of being happy to be able to watch it in movies, like, so where I'm at, I'm in Ontario, and we only had movie theaters open, what was it, like a few weeks ago now, maybe close to a month now. But there would have been a reality of, if we were still closed, like I wouldn't have been able to I would have watched it on my computer or something, like on my TV at home, which this movie is one that, watching it in a theater with the massive screen, because like I said before, all the colors and the tableaus, as you called them, it's perfect. It's beautiful. And to see it in such a massive, massive screen is kind of, that's how it should be. And then one aspect, I know you and I both love this, was the sound design. I don't care how good your system is, unless you are shelling out for like a lot of money in a home theater. Most people aren't going to have a sound system that can do what a movie theater can do for a movie like this. That, when the Green Knight first arrives at the the Knights of the Round Table meeting, he gets off of his horse, and you can just hear the creaking and cracking and every movement that he makes, every step that he takes. I'm getting into like the Police song there, but like you can hear, like, he's made out of like a tree, right? So you can hear the bark and the cracking of it. And I love that. And even there was a really small thing that I loved, was when the Green Knight hands the letter over to the king, and then the queen is the one who opens it up and reads it out. It's such a small thing, but so the letter is sealed with a wax seal, right? Because it's medieval.
When she cracks it open?
When she cracks it open.
Oh, that was such a satisfying sound.
It was so satisfying hearing that. It's just like, she cracks it open and it splits perfectly down the page. And it was just one of those, I'm just like, that is the most satisfying sound I've heard in a really long time. But it's in a movie theater that you can really appreciate stuff like that. And I'm so thankful that our movie theaters opened up in time for us to be able to actually enjoy it in a movie theater with other people. Like you said, like, it's a cool thing when you can leave a theater and everyone's just talking about it. And there was like a group of younger guys that were sitting behind me, and I could just hear one of them at the end go like, what the hell was that? And I was like, yeah, talk about it. It's fun. Like, what the hell was that? I don't know. It's interesting. Like, I love that. Like, I love that we got the movie theater experience for it. So I'm happy that they held off releasing it until now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are the experiences that you just live for as a movie fan.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah.
All right. I feel like we could probably talk about the actual movie itself for like another 5 hours, but I'm going to switch things up and we're going to get into our little fun section now. And we're going to start out with our double bill pairing. So this is as usual. We have to name a double bill movie to pair with The Green Knight, but it cannot be another A24 film. And so Rachel, what was your double bill pairing for The Green Knight?
Okay. So last time I bent the rules a little and I chose a
You
TV
did.
show. And I'm going to bend the
penalty
rule.
box.
Yeah. I'm going to bend the rules a little again and give two options. And there's a good reason for that. So my original double pairing was, it's kind of silly, but I don't think it's that silly. The Sword and the Stone, the Disney movie from 1963. I didn't realize it was that old, actually. Have you seen it when you were a kid?
I believe when I was a kid. I don't have any real recollection of it, but I'm sure I saw it at one point.
It is like one of my favorite Disney movies ever created. And it's one of the most like forgotten ones. Like people, I don't know why. It's so good though. Like Merlin is great. And anyways, it's the reason I initially chose it was I wanted to try to find something that was along the King Arthur, legend, the King Arthur tale. But it's tricky trying to find something because everything it doesn't go with this. And so for me, I thought nothing goes with this movie because it is so unique. Like The Green Knight is incredibly unique, which is a real achievement especially today. Like it feels like we don't have very many original films, original movies out there anymore. And even though this is an interpretation of a tale that's literally hundreds of years old, the interpretation of it is incredibly unique. So I thought, it's so serious and it's so strange. Go with a really heartwarming Disney movie that will send you back to childhood, and it's just fun and it's enjoyable. So that was the original one that I had thought of. Okay. But I recently watched a screener for a movie called 9 Days.
You are being considered for the amazing opportunity of life. If you are selected, you will have the chance to be born in a fruitful environment where you can grow, develop, and accomplish.
Am I dead?
I wouldn't say you're alive or dead.
It's coming out August 6th in Canada, and in the States as well, August 6th. I believe New York and LA already have it. It's a movie. It stars Winston Duke, Benedict Wong, who else is in it? Zazie Beetz, Tony Hale, and Bill Skarsgård. So it's a movie about, without giving too much away, it's about life. Like, it's a movie about life. And for me, I found The Green Knight, the notes that I took away from it, as unsure as I am about the movie, the things I love about it was this kid at the beginning who, he just wants to make something of himself. When the king says to him, when Gawain comes in the Knights of the Round Table, and the king says, "Come sit next to me." And he goes, "Tell me a story. Like, tell me a tale." And Gawain goes, "I don't have one. Like, I haven't lived. Like, I haven't done anything worthy of a tale." And it reminded me of when I was in university, and believe it or not, we had to do interviews to join extracurricular clubs. And one of the questions in a club that I was interviewing for was, "What's your proudest achievement?" I was like 19 at the time, and I literally had nothing that I was like, I'm 19. Like, I haven't done anything that I think is remotely something that I could sit here and be like, this is my proudest achievement in life. And it always stuck with me, like that question. Because I was like, what is that? And so when I watched it on The Green Knight, I thought, God, like, I was Gawain. Like, I was like, I think we all were. We all had that moment when we were young of wanting to achieve a lot. And Alicia Vikander's character, Esther, she has a great line where she says, like, everyone's so, like, I'm paraphrasing here, but she's basically, everyone's so obsessed with greatness. What's wrong with goodness? And I definitely fall into that category of saying, like, you want to do the greatest thing in life. And as you get older, you realize the reason that greatness is great is because not many people actually get to achieve it. And without spoiling The Green Knight, there does come a moment where he's just like, is this all there is? that hit me actually quite a bit. I was just like, yeah, is this all there is? So when I was watching the movie 9 Days, it has similar themes. Like, it's about life, and it's about the importance of life and what's the point of life. And it looks at kind of the beauty of life as well. So I'm going to take out The Sword and the Stone. I'm going to put 9 Days in, especially because it's coming out this coming Friday. And you can literally go and do a double billing of it, because you can go to the theater and you can watch both of those movies. So I thought that would be more appropriate.
Okay, that's a very interesting one that can't even talk about or compare it because no one else has seen it yet. So gonna have to take your word on that a little bit. But yeah, I do find that a little bit interesting about the Sword and the Stone pairing. I think that's a good one. I came out of this and I was like, I don't think there's any sort of Arthurian type of movie that you can compare it to. You know, I talked about Kingdom of Heaven a bit earlier, where that's a bit of a contemplative film, but still has significant action scenes, where this really doesn't have anything quite like that. And so I sort of was trying to think about, like, what, Monty Python, the Holy Grail? No, that's ridiculous. That wouldn't really work at all. And after that, the pickings get real slim because you get either really cheesy ones or nothing really exists quite like it. So I just like, you know what? Just get past that completely. I'm not even going to compare it to a movie like this. And so I went in a complete opposite direction. And you're going to have to bear with me for just a moment. The movie I'm picking is Eyes Wide Shut. Have you seen this movie?
Okay. Yeah, I have.
Okay. So here's where you need to stick with me.
Okay.
Both movies were sort of mischaracterized of their genre and what it was to be expected. The Green Knight was marketed as this medieval epic, but instead it's kind of a cold and mysterious meditative film about loyalty, bravery, and making a name for yourself. Eyes Wide Shut was viewed as an erotic thriller with Tom Cruise's Dr. William invading a secretive cult. Sex cult, really. That film wasn't that either. It was more about one man's quest to understand why his life and marriage was falling apart. So I'm pairing these because they're two movies that are there to sort of subvert your expectations of what the genre is supposed to be and what they are and how they actually end up being.
I like that. That's very clever, especially because that was, I mean, that entire idea of expectations not being met because of the marketing, because of the trailers and all that kind of stuff. I didn't have that with Eyes Wide Shut because when that came out, we were a little young, and I watched it like quite a few years after it came out. But that's really I like that. I like that you put those together for that reason. That's very creative, because I know that you were saying like you had no idea. Like
yeah,
it's tough pairing another medieval movie with this. Like, I really think it's difficult too. That's interesting. I wonder how that would be watching it in a double billing, like actually sitting back to back and watching those two. There is commonalities in like both movies are quite sexy in a way, but for very different reasons. Like, they're quite sexy, but I guess so. they have that kind of underlying thing of like there is like sex appeal in both, obviously in Eyes Wide Shut, but in The Green Knight as well.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so now we're going to go into our next fun little game, and that's, do you want to play a game? I feel like I'm Jigsaw doing the Green Knight impression. What would you rather do? So hit me with a would you rather question.
So in previous ones, we've gone like within the movie, like a concept within the movie, but I'm actually going to look at it as a movie, like as like a tangible film. So I'm going to say to you, would you rather have a continuation on of where the thieves went to and what they did, or to Winifred, like what happens to her after? Whose story would you rather follow? They're both actually pretty interesting.
I think would be even a tougher decision if you had said the Lord and the Lady or Winifred.
Put all three. So those are your three like side quests. Those were the three side quests of the game. Which one? Definitely. Yeah.
I think I could probably take out the scavengers. You know, they're just little mischievous little bastards. Winifred one is really interesting because I feel like her entire tale could be an interesting one where she kind of tells it, but actually seeing that and seeing what it's like for her to wait for someone to come by to be able to rescue her head from the bottom of the lake. Does she only come out at night? Does she only come out when it's the full moon? Mm-hmm. Does it have to be someone who is, pure of heart, that sort of Arthurian tale, like backstory trope that they use? So all that sort of stuff would be really interesting to kind of do, and I think that could make for a pretty good like ghost film, spooky horror film. But then also I kind of like the idea of maybe exploring more about the Lord and the Lady, especially with this castle that may not be as what it seems. So I think that would be kind of a curious, interesting one too, where I'd probably want, if I was to like pay a ticket, I'm not good with ghosts, so I'd probably go with that one, especially if we learn what the old lady was all about.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, the old lady would be like, but it might be she's literally just in the corner the whole time.
Yeah. She can't. I think maybe she can't see because she saw something once that she cannot see again, or was not supposed to see, and that was her punishment or something like that.
That's I don't know. That's pretty funny. Like they did something so abhorrent. She was like, her eyes just like, she's like, my eyes, they're done. It's finished.
Was it self-inflicted or did someone do it to her?
Yeah. That's pretty funny.
All right. What about you? Do you have an answer for that?
Probably Winifred, just because I find her, I like that was literally like the most captivating thing in the movie to me. Like it was just so interesting. And, I wish I had her name. Her first name is Carrie. I know that because she was in
Kelly, yeah,
an MCU show. But she's great. Like,
she has such a look, doesn't she?
Yeah, like it's perfect. Like they made
Erin
her
Kellyman. That's what it is. Yeah,
yeah. They made her really pale, which is obviously because you're a ghost. But and like I like that they kept like her hair was red. The way she dressed, like I like that she hovered across the board. Like she was really good. Like God, she was, yeah. She played it perfectly. And then I just think the story is interesting, like the story of how she ended up dead. And now she's like, oh, like one line that gets me is she goes, "Did my father send for you?" It's like she's this girl. There? Yeah. She's a girl that, for various reasons she's dead, and she's in this cabin in the middle of the woods, and all she wants to know is like, does my dad even care that I'm gone, kind of thing. Like I that would probably be the one. I would actually say too, though, the thieves are interesting, just saying like they're kids and you want to know if they went to try to find, the Green Chapel, what happened to them? Like, how did they do? How'd they do? Like we get a glimpse of them later on in the film, but like nothing substantial, but or of one of them anyways. And yeah, I don't know. They would be interesting as well. Like it would be an interesting piece to kind of continue on with.
All right. So you ready for mine?
Yes.
Okay. Where would you rather spend Christmas? Would it be at a brothel or a house of ill repute, however you want to characterize what was going on in that fun house, or at a stuffy castle with relatives you don't know very well?
Oh, the brothel.
Come on, that's the answer, right?
100% the brothel. I wouldn't want to, especially that castle. Like it's weird. 100% the brothel. I think it'd be more fun. It would be a much more relaxed situation. You don't have to be as on guard and proper, I suppose is a good way to say it. It would just be more fun. I think it would just be a lot more fun. Like I'm not a huge like drinker or anything like that, but like, yeah, I think that would be a great time.
It looks like when they're there, they're gambling a little bit, they're drinking. If you want to have sex, it's there too.
Yeah,
like, anything you really want.
Literally, the world is your oyster in a brothel. Like
if you got the money,
let that be known. The world is your oyster. When you got money in a brothel, it's everything. Yeah, is that your answer too? The brothel?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, that'd be fun though. That would be interesting. I wonder if it's fun in our head, but then if we actually got there, we would be the people there in the corner that you're like, don't touch anything.
Everything has syphilis.
Yeah, you're just like, don't just like, what is it? You put like socks on your hands, and you're just like, I'm just not going to touch anything right now.
Can I lay a napkin down on this seat, please?
Yeah, exactly. And we would just be like the most prudish people there.
Yeah. All right, so I think that sort of wraps up our discussion of The Green Knight. I feel like we kind of only scratched the surface, but I think that was still a fun discussion, and really talking with you helped sort of make me understand the movie a bit more and solidify my feelings that I really like this movie quite a bit. And I know you're probably being like, yeah, solidified my feelings in the opposite direction, but screw you.
I will say, so there was a quote that I read in an interview on The Wrap by Sean Abrams that I just want to throw out there was I've been having a bit of a tough time kind of nailing down exactly how I feel about this movie and whether or not I like it or not. Like, I think I can safely say I do like it. Like, I like a lot of elements of it. And I like how interesting it is, but he had a pretty negative review. So it was Simon Abrams. Yeah. And he, at the very end of his review, he finishes it with, like, the movie's never as compelling as it is unusual. And I think that, for me, really puts, like, that's it. It's a really unusual movie. And it kind of feels like it's unusual for the sake of being unusual. And it's not as interesting as you would think an unusual movie would be. Does that make any sense? Like, for as interesting as some of the scenes were, like I said, the last sequence, the whole scene with Lady Winifred, like, those are really cool. But for a lot of the movie, like, it's a relatively long movie too. Like, I think it's 2:10,
like it's 2 hours 10 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a long movie, and there's a lot in it that you can just kind of, like, you could close your eyes and open and you would still be fine. Like, you would still be you might miss a few details here and there, sure, but, like, you would still be fine to follow what is going on in the story. So I feel okay. Yeah, I don't know. I'm still very much so on the fence about this movie. Yeah, so I don't know, but I love that quote that Mr. Abrams wrote. So that's in the Wrap.
Yeah, so I'm going to look at that one too, because maybe that'll help me a bit as well. Maybe it'll make me like it even more. But Rachel, where can everyone find you and more of your work? Especially now since you have to plug your new Instagram account too.
Oh gosh, yes. So I'm on website is rachelkh.com. Yeah, and I set up an Instagram account. I'm just kind of trying it out, see how it's going. I grabbed a few different names, and I have landed now on _pop quiz hotshot. And if you know where that's from, then we can be friends.
Then you pass the pop quiz.
Yeah, very good.
And I will give listeners a hint. If you listen to the Better Know a Contributor episode, last week's episode, you'll probably get the answer there. Yes. Did you, other than your recent review of The Green Knight, is there anything else that you've worked on that you want to plug?
I've got a Stillwater review out with Exclaim, and I actually just put a new blog post up of my 10 most anticipated movies for the rest of the year. So Green Knight was definitely for the full year. We've just started, it's August 1st that we're recording on. And so I was just looking at the remainder of 2021, especially because now we're going into movies that are like award contenders, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I just jotted down like 10 movies that I'm really looking forward to. And I'd be interested to hear yours, Dakota, and anybody else's that's listening.
Yeah, that's I might have to write like a companion piece to it, because really I think the movie year is just starting now.
Yeah, 100%.
This release is like the beginning of the movie year for me.
10 was actually really difficult to, like, I had a much longer list, and then I thought this is too long. So I was like, this is just silly. Like, now I'm just naming every single movie that's coming
53 out. 53 movies I'm excited about.
Yeah. So I was like, we'll bring it down to 10, and it's a strong 10. And they're like I said, there's ones that are left off that, I am very much so looking forward to seeing. But yeah, I got my 10 up on my site right now.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm going to check that out. Well, make sure you follow the show on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at contrazoompod. And if you've seen The Green Knight, let us know your thoughts. And if you can make any more sense of it than we just try to do, feel like we're fiddling around in the dark sort of thing, send an email to contrazoompod@gmail.com. Thank you to Eric and Kevin Smale for the theme music, and to Stephanie Pryor for the logo design. If you like to listen to podcasts on YouTube, we do post all episodes there as well. Thanks for checking us out.